Welcome back to Good Revenue. We're here today with Jim Stevenson. He's an expert in turnarounds, restructuring, M&A, and value optimization. Welcome, Jim. We are excited to have you.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into turnarounds?
Wow, that's a long answer. I hope you've got a few hours to spare. My background is very strange, and getting into turnarounds was a very long and windy path. I started out life in Scotland with my accent in construction, which gave me a very commercial background, which I loved. It was the combination of all of that experience which led me to working for a company that I was trying to do growth for, but turned out actually within the first week it was truly insolvent and it needed a whole turnaround done to it. And that was really the first time I got into turnarounds. I turned around that business in 8 months. The private equity firm that owned it sold the UK divisions of it 6 months later. And that kind of gave me the kind of interest in turnaround specifically. If you think of the functional verticals that most organizations are organized into, I've pretty much been there and done that in most of them. And I think that's a hugely valuable skill set because it's the gaps between the functional teams where things normally go wrong. So if you can see actually how you're handing this customer over to another team, whether it's from marketing to sales to operations to customer, whatever it is, you can understand the basics of how companies should be structured, where they're going wrong, where the challenges are. And that then all leads into doing the basics well.
It's such an interesting point that it's the gaps between the functions. Are there any patterns that you recognized from that? Are there functions where, typically that's what you would target when you're walking into a situation, given that I'm sure all companies are a little different when it comes to this kind of work?
For me, it's less a pattern within the gaps. The gaps is where it becomes highlighted that there's an issue. But ultimately, the issue truly is company culture, any kind of toxicity coming into any type of my team's the best team and we're all great and everyone else is rubbish. And that normally means that your team is performing really well, but you're not playing well as part of the overall group. If you're focused on your team and your team's objectives, you're not focusing on the wider team's objectives, the whole company's objectives, and making the company great. And that always ends up with one team's performing amazingly, but the company's not doing very well. How did that happen?
So it's so true. And it's an interesting point. I'm a little sensitive to OKRs. I find that many organizations adopt OKRs and they intend it almost as a Band-Aid or a stopgap for the core problem, which is a lack of a defined strategy. And so people are driving towards results, but it is not clear that we are all going in the right direction or it's not clear if this is the direction in which we should travel, if that makes sense.
100% agree with you. I think all of these things are great. I personally love OKRs. I love agility. I love strategy, but it's like everything else. If you do it incorrectly, it doesn't help. In fact, very often it hinders. And I think OKRs are one of these very misunderstood techniques. For me personally, depending on the environment you're in, OKRs for me was always, you should never achieve your OKRs. If you achieve your OKR, you're not pushing yourself far enough.
Right.
People get bonused on their OKR and you didn't hit 100%, so you're not getting your bonus. And it's that's old thinking, is how you implement it. And it's the same with agility. I went into an organization and I won't say their name, but they were using Agile language. So they wanted to do daily stand-ups, scrums and sprints, and they were using this language. And it took me easily 6 weeks to learn that they were using the correct language. They were just using it badly. You're talking all the right words, but you're not actioning them in the right way. And I think it's the same. It goes back to what I said, it's the basics. Get your strategy right, get everyone aligned behind your strategy, your vision, where you're going from. And then you need a mechanism that actually allows you to make sure that everyone is pulling in that one direction, no matter what team or department they're in, whether in sales, marketing, whatever function they are, you need to make sure they're there. And that, for me, is where OKRs come in. And then you've got an underlying pinning of that, which is not that Agile is in the methodology that the tech companies use, but Agile with a small e. So how do you get that innovation into your organization, that culture into your organization? And you need all of those things in place. And for my personal experience, once you get a few of those things in place, the organization fundamentally changes itself, and it fundamentally then moves into one whereby the teams are coming to you with solutions and say, we want to do it this way because that way didn't work for us. And again, Agile with a small e, teams are doing retrospectives. What did we get wrong last week? How can we get it better this week? And whether it's weekly, monthly, every 2 weeks, whatever the cadence is for it, it's just a really good thing to do, whether you're a marketing team, whether you're a sales team, whether you're an operations team, whether you're a warehouse fulfillment team. That constant drive for, we could have done that better, really, couldn't we? And just as a side point for the listeners, never make what you want to change involve spending money. Nothing you're doing to improve yourself should be involving spending lots and lots of money. That's the cheat. You can improve so much just by using the resources you have, the people you have, and just allowing the people that are on the coalface, on the actual workings, doing the job, to recommend ways of making it easy. It just makes your company better.
This is a great segue to one of my questions, which is, what do people get wrong about turnarounds?
For me personally, there's so many things that people get wrong about turnarounds. Very often when you're thinking about turnarounds or transformation or changing your organization in any way, you start with the IT team because all of your systems have to change. And it's okay, so we're going to give the change management function, the transformation function, the turnaround function to the IT team. And that's not what your IT team's there for. It's just not. The IT team's great at lots of things. And yes, your business is built on systems and processes that are driven by your IT function. But if you truly want to change your organization, you need to change it from the top down. You need to change the culture. You need to change how people think, change how people operate. You need to accept the fact that people make mistakes, including the CEO and the chairman and the board and everyone else. We all make mistakes. It's getting into this fluidity of where you're going as an organization, and your IT team can't help you with that. Very often, your change management team can't help you with that. It has to come from the top down. I've done one, it was not so much a turnaround, it's more a transformation one, where though a big organization, hundreds of millions of revenue, they said that they wanted to change. They engaged with me to help them do the change. They didn't want to change. They wanted to put a tick in the box that said, we've gone through a transformation and we're now great. Not actually change anything. Changing was something that someone else in the organization would do, but they didn't have to change. They were fine. And it's no, it has to go across the entire organization. You can change, and for me, it almost comes down to the definition of the words that you use. Changes, you change a team, you change a system, you change a process. You transform organizations, you transform departments, you transform companies. And then the turnaround part on top of that is generally where you're starting in your transformation journey. If you're a successful company, you want to transform. If you're not a successful company and you've got problems, you want to turn around where your problems are and make them successful. So it almost comes into a language thing of where you are. And I think the language is important because it then also comes into your mindset. It's not a big change I'm doing. It's just a small change. It's this team, it's this process, it's this customer journey I want to change. So I'm changing these little things to make things better. Or actually, do you know what? Our organization isn't set up for AI. AI is coming. We're going to get left behind. We need an entire transformation piece. Or I'm sure there's going to be lots of companies out there in 3 or 4 years' time, they're going to be behind the 8 ball on the AI transformation. And for them, it will be a turnaround. Their entire business model had to change to catch up because they were too slow at reacting. And I'm not criticizing any of those companies. It's just how companies operate. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah, but you can see it's going to be broke very soon. So now's your chance to transform and change and improve and get better. Otherwise, in 3 or 4 years' time, your transformation is going to be a turnaround to try and rescue what you can and move forward in some way.
The opportunities to get ahead of it. Yeah. Obviously, change is hard for people in a lot of organizations, but the incentives for executives, leaders, managers, even for salespeople, all of that really drives the day-to-day behavior and the immediacy of company. The idea of risking that to make change that feels uncertain, people really struggle with that. Do you agree?
And yeah, I will tell you a story where aligning the objectives is so important. But I agree. It's whether you're brave enough to actually see the future and drive towards the future, or whether you want to keep what you've got, which is comfortable. And I understand why people do that. It's a very basic human nature thing of you're comfortable here, why change? But the reality is either you change and you get ahead of it, or your competitors change, in which case you become the legacy. And that for me is just a no-brainer. You constantly change. I can't remember who said it, but someone said the 2 constants in life are change and taxis. And they're completely right. You have to constantly be evolving and moving forward and doing things better, changing things. Otherwise, you do become legacy, at which point you have a problem. But the aligning your team, I have a very, and I won't tell you who it is, but I worked with a company. They were the number one in their sector in the market they were in. They bought the number two and were trying to merge them together, and decided that actually the number two company, the CTO from that company, would be a better group CEO once they brought everything together. But of course, he was on an earnout. So he's more experienced, but he was on an earnout. His motives, his alignment wasn't there. His motives were to merge two websites together. But he wasn't looking at the company's long-term value. He wasn't looking at the company's long-term revenue even. He was looking at what he needed to do to get his earnout. And his earnout simply said, bring both websites together. We want one unified website. But the reality of that decision of not aligning and not being clear on what that meant was the number one company that bought the second one. They had a really good bespoke platform built for them, brilliant team who ultimately all left and went to Google. But the CTO made the decision to go back to a legacy version of Magenta. Not only did his lack of alignment to the business objectives, they had gone back in time, it meant that after he got his earnout, the company then had to go through and rebuild a team, move from a legacy platform with no upgrade path to a whole new platform, and the disruption to the customers, a disruption to the customer experience. And the company wasn't huge. It was maybe turning over 150 million. I reckon that one decision over 2 or 3 years cost them 20, 30 million in lost revenue and extra cost and rebuilding a team and hiring them, getting up to speed. It was a major impact to them. And it was one very simple thing on an M&A deal, essentially, where you were actually trying to get the deal over the line, and they just simply put in there a lack of detail on how this guy got his earnout. And like most people, he focused on his earnout.
Wow, what a missed opportunity, but a great story.
Yeah. It's one of those things that the devil's in the detail. And if you want alignment, you need to be very clear on what alignment you're looking for, and you need to pay attention to it.
And the outcome, what outcome are trying to drive here, right?
In that example, I did some analysis, and I knew that if they built a search function into the new website they were building, that would increase the conversion by 2.6 times. And he just refused to do it because it added a risk into him getting his goal of a single platform. And can't blame him. I think he was looking
he was acting logically, right? In his own interest. Yeah, but not for the organization.
It just highlights this lack of alignment and how important it truly is to get there.
It's a powerful story.
Yeah.
One of the projects you led was the turnaround at Marks and Spencer, which is a brand I think even Americans have heard of. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? What was that like?
Marks and Spencer's was really quite weird, and I can't tell you everything because it's a publicly traded company, but they spent an awful lot of money, more than they told everyone they were spending, to move away from an Amazon platform onto their own in-house platform. And about 6 months before they were due to go live, they were unsure that it was going to have the impact. They got nervous. We've been doing this for 3 years. A classic big program, IT-led, changing the organization, changing the platform, with a view to increasing revenue and taking control of their online platform. For Marks and Spencer's at the time, their online platform had turned over about 300 million a year. Marks and Spencer's turned over about 10 billion, very much an offline. Online, it was about 300 million. And they wanted it to grow. They knew it was growing. That was why they were investing in this new platform. But it was all very traditional. They'd spec'd the requirements 3 years before. They'd spent lots of time building it, delivering on it. There was lots of change requests as things changed, but it didn't have the fluidity of customer expectation was changing. They didn't recognize that as they were going along, they were focusing on the website, completely missed the fact that the iPad, and it wasn't tablets, it was iPad for the consumer who is a Marks and Spencer's consumer. It was the iPad that was growing exponentially in how people were actually booking online. I was asked to go in and see if I could help and just get some kind of sanity. So I restructured them into understanding what product was, how product as a technology mechanism worked. Your website's a product, but your online authentication is a sub-product within that. The homepage is a sub-product within that. Understanding how all of these things go together. Your iPad's got a product in it as well. So I restructured them around about those concepts. I started off that entire project with a little Skunksworks team, which I loved. We picked the iPad, 300 million in revenue a year. We did some user testing, and we could prove that the conversion of the iPad version would drop 1%. If they went live with what they were proposing, conversion would drop 1%. So a loss of 3 million in revenue. So I took 6 of their team, an amazing bunch of guys, really enthusiastic, just wanted to learn a new way of working. recognized the old ways weren't particularly good, didn't really know or didn't have the experience to know what new ways they could be using and things. So it really engaged with me in how we did it. So 6 of their team, we did 4 2-week sprints, so 8 weeks. And at the end of that period, we did some user testing again. And I can prove that the new version we put in actually increased conversion by 1%. So increased by, so 6 million delta. And that was 6 of their team, never used Agile and never used any of these kind of transformation processes before, but increased revenue by 6 million over 8 weeks. And that's very powerful. And once you get through that, everyone then starts to see the value of doing it a different way, doing it another way. And at that point, you become pushing on an open door. And there was a few people there that just completely thought everything I was saying in this transformation turnaround piece was unbelievably nonsense. It was counterintuitive. I was a complete idiot. Why have we got this guy in the building? And there was only 3 or 4 of them. I think most people just ignored me if they thought that. But I did go to a conference 2 years afterwards. And one of the guys that thought I was a complete idiot and didn't know anything, he'd obviously been working in this environment before and gone through similar kind of turnarounds and stuff. And he came up and gave me a cuddle at this conference. I said, I've not seen him in 2 years. And last time I saw him, he thought I was a complete idiot. But the penny had dropped for him. And he recognized that actually traditional legacy companies do traditional legacy things in traditional legacy ways. And that generally is harder. There's generally an easier way of doing things. You just need to be open-minded about exploring what those better, easier, quicker, more efficient, more cost-effective ways are. And it helps everyone. Everyone gets it. The company makes more money. The teams are more effective. The teams have more fun. The teams are more empowered. They're more inspired. They've got more autonomy to do what is the right thing to do. So yeah, it works. It works amazingly well. And Marks and Spencer's, 6 months after I left, they reported to the London stock market that their online presence had increased by 160 million because they'd done a transformation piece.
That's amazing. What was most challenging?
Most times it's the people and the resistance to change, but it's the levels that you get it at. Like I say, I did one company in the UK and it failed miserably because they said they wanted to change, but they didn't. That came from the board. And if the board are saying they want to change, but not actually doing anything, then the rest of the teams below them. So if you can get people on board to do these things, then it's much easier. I do remember I did do a presentation to a board where it was all very formal. Everyone was in suits and ties and things. And because I wanted to disrupt their thinking, I showed up in a T-shirt, a Hugo Boss jacket and Levi jeans. And you just saw their brain, who is this person? Why would they even dress like this to come into a board meeting? And suddenly, actually, you've got them out of the traditional mindset. You've got them thinking differently. Even if it's hating on me, that's fine. We'll get over that. I've broken you out of your traditional thinking. And now that you're not thinking everyone has to wear a suit, everyone has to work in this way. Now we can start talking about what do we want to achieve? How do we want to move forward? How can we improve the company? So yeah, it's always down to people not wanting to change. Everything else you can get around it if people are on board.
You're also a big advocate for de-risking the business. If we have CFOs listening, I'm sure they're clapping because that's certainly a powerful and popular goal. But it seems like a lot of times de-risking is just equated with cost cutting. How do you think about this? What's your approach to helping companies build a more balanced business?
I like how you've set that up so that every CFO listening is now going, yeah, that's what we want. And now I'm going to give them the answer and they're going to hate on me. I fundamentally believe that most businesses have too much cost. Generally, my personal experience is I can increase your revenue by 20 to 30%, but at the same time, I can reduce your cost by 20 or 30% by being more effective, being more aligned to your customer. But I never ever focus on cost savings. Cost savings for me are a false economy. If you're only focusing on cost savings, the end result is you have no business. You just keep cutting and cutting because it's cost saving after cost saving. So for me, I always like to focus on growing your revenue. And part of that comes along with cost savings. But the fundamental mind shift change for me is don't think about your revenue or your costs. Think about your value. If you're adding value to your customer, they will come and spend more money with you. And that generally comes with it as a cost saving. Unless you're in luxury, if you're Gucci or something, then your cost base has to be an extra level to give that quality of experience. But that experience is part of your product. That for me is a part of the value you're adding. And that's why people go to Gucci or Louis Vuitton or whoever other luxury brand you want to slot into that place. If you focus on value, you give your customers what they're looking for, and that brings with it a cost saving, but also brings with more revenue, more efficiencies, happier customers, bigger basket sizes, more loyalty, and all of those things. Jeff Bezos wrote a letter, his famous letters to his shareholders. I still go back to the one where he says, we're going to focus relentlessly on our customers. I love that line, relentlessly. It's like everything else will come. If we've got customers who are loyal to us, if we've got customers that want to buy from us, if we've got customers that can come back week after week, month after month, because they like the service, they like the efficiency, they like the customer experience, then pretty much everything else follows after that. Because if you don't have customers, you don't have a business. You can have the most efficient business in the world. If you don't have a customer, you don't really have anything. Yes, absolutely. Cost savings, efficiency is a huge part of what I do and what I advocate doing. But that is secondary to adding value to your customers. Focus on your top line. The second line tends to come along for the journey.
Tell us more about that. Every organization says we love our customers, et cetera. When you ask the customers of that firm, oftentimes those customers feel like their company hates them, right? I've been citing this a lot, but there was a Forrester benchmark survey that came out a couple of weeks ago that had some of the lowest customer approval ratings that you've ever seen. It was 100,000 people that they surveyed, and only 3% of more than 200 brands are considered customer obsessed. And they said the only sector that has improved is airline. That's how bad it is out there, apparently. Could you take us through maybe some examples of how you bring that customer focus into your work, whether it is turnarounds or restructuring?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's two examples I would give, and they're actually the same company, so I won't tell you the company.
Sure.
The company, hugely successful, brilliant people. They're fantastic people. I love them dearly. They're still friends, and I worked with them 10 years ago. Two examples, though. When I joined them, I needed to do an entire restructuring of the company. And it wasn't what I was brought on for. I was brought on to help them growth and accelerate their growth. But in doing that restructuring, it also became very clear that customer service had never been spoken. No one spoke to customer. People didn't even know where the customer service team were sitting. And yet they were all in the same building. No one had gone to customer service and said, tell me what the customers think. What's the challenge? Give me the top 10 things that customers phone you every day for. What are the problems? As part of the restructuring, I changed how they prioritized the work they were doing. I got them into a process of essentially scorecarding the initiatives they wanted against their strategy and putting a value on that, which was all very Fibonacci numbered and irrelevant to the actual value. It was relational rather than absolute. 0.2 million if you do this project. I got that entire process, and I included the customer service team in a monthly meeting that evaluated the initiatives the company wanted to do for the impact it would have on the company's customers. Because they're the ones that are speaking to the customers every day. So if you want to improve your experience, go and speak to your customer service. When was the last time you ever heard a chief operating officer or a CEO actually going down and speaking to customer service? It doesn't happen. They're a byproduct almost, and yet everyone wants to be customer-centric. For me, a bit of a proxy in how customer-centric is a company is how is the customer service team viewed? Are they part of this, or are they just viewed as a disgruntled customer? We don't want to deal with them, you deal with them, and we're just going to ignore them. So that's one thing in being customer-centric. The other one, and it was the same company, the way they were structured didn't allow them to have enough user experience people. So again, this is an online business. So I got them to rebalance the team. So if you've got X number of salespeople, X number of developers, and X number of customers, you needed X number of user experience people to balance all of that out. Otherwise, you were creating bottlenecks by a lack of resource or a lack of prioritization within the resources. So we employed a couple more user experience people, but I got them to start doing customer journeys. Nothing rocket science about that, but if you've never done it before, if you've not been in that world, it is quite revolutionary. So I got them to do customer journeys, and you could just see every one of the guys was just going, why are we doing this? Is such a waste. I've spent all day here. I've got brown paper on a wall. I've got post-it notes everywhere. This isn't making any sense. And eventually we converted it all into, I think it was Figma or something, but we did it. And then once we had done it and everyone knew what the key customer journeys were for the organization, I then got them to put data on it. And suddenly you just saw this light bulb moment from all of these people going, so actually all of the users we're capturing are getting to this, but this is where they're all falling off. What have we done wrong there? And suddenly you could see this whole mechanic. And literally I spent a day with them, forcing them to do customer journeys, and then an hour with them, forcing them to put data on it. And then they took over. They saw suddenly the value became tangible to them. And you suddenly saw them. So we then started to put in place an A/B testing framework, so they could actually go away and play and test and see what worked and what didn't work without impacting hugely on the company's revenue. But they could do things. And some of the conversion rates that we were getting was stark. I think one of them was over 1,000% improvement. And it's wow. But you just saw this enthusiasm, this kind of, this is genius. This works for us. This is what we should have been doing all along. And yeah, when I left that engagement with the client, I actually got the entire team to go through all of the essentially user testing that they had done and put, what did you do? Why did you do? What was your hypothesis? What was the results? And I think I ended up with something like a 60-page PowerPoint or something like that. And every one of them had a big green arrow pointing, improved conversion here, improved this, improved results here. And it was just such a stark change for them. But suddenly they were understanding the challenges their customer had. They were understanding at which point the customer was blocked. They were understanding why the customer was dropping off. And they didn't always, but once in a while, they would actually go out and speak to customers. They'd put a survey on the website and just say, how are you finding this? But engage your customers, understand their problems, understand their challenges. Suddenly you're customer-centric and you get the value from that. Not just in your revenue value, but the team get excited by it as well.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I take all the credit for it, but they did all the work.
Switching gears, you also have helped with new market launches. And one of the ones that I thought was interesting was your experience launching the Guardian into the US. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Most people don't realize, but in a world where everything is commercial and it's shareholder value, the Guardian's actually owned and run by a trust. Their whole objective is nothing to do with making money, and they achieve that objective very well, I have to say. The whole objective is all about quality news journalism. They've broken stories that no other news organization in the world would spend the money on, and purely because they're owned by this trust. But the trust ultimately will run out of money at some point, so they needed to become more commercial, a bit more savvy in what they were doing. They noticed that about a third of their readership was in the US, but they didn't have any specific US content. They had a bureau in Washington, D.C., I think, but it was just a few reporters politically. So we wanted to move and have a proper US version of the news online. We moved the bureau to New York, but my role in it was updating the website to actually have a US-centric version of the content, of everything, and launching essentially, because the whole news organization is the website these days. So we launched that into the US. That was fun. Again, I applied customer centricity to it, which was pretty easy because customers were demanding it almost. We had a small team. I think ultimately it was probably about 7 people in total. It wasn't a big thing, but we fundamentally changed underlying systems so that it could accommodate essentially 2 geographies. There was the UK, which included the rest of the world, and then there was the US-centric version of it, but it needed to be able to be brought in, allow systems for the journalists to actually be able to upload content and verify and sub-edit and approve content and things like that. But from a launch point of view, from a business launch, a market, it was incredibly simple because people were demanding it from us. It wasn't like we had to go out and check with them and create a whole new market and do marketing campaigns and things like that. People demanded it. So we were very much pushing on an open door there. As soon as we launched, it was 30-40% of the Guardian's world's news audience. We also did a partnership around the same time with Facebook, one of their F8 conference. I think it was the first F8 conference, which actually made the Guardian the largest English-speaking news organization in the world for about 3 months until someone noticed, because all their content was being disseminated through Facebook, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, we did a lot of really cool stuff for the Guardian, changing a lot of mindsets, a lot of perceptions, going from a newspaper to a digital-first organization to a mobile-first organization. We also did, I need to check this, but at the time, it was the largest conversion from a .co.uk to a .com. And that worried a lot of people because a lot of people were like, our traffic's going to drop, it's going to plummet, it's all going to go bad, we're going to lose all of our money. And so we did a huge amount of work for about 12 months beforehand to bolster our SEO, to change our architecture of our systems, so that when we did do that conversion, it worked really well. And the team that did it were just fantastic. Yeah, if you're the Financial Times or the Economist, then you make money because of the very specific niche you're in. But most general news organizations lose money. It's just the way it
Right.
is. And when I was there, The Guardian was losing 52 million a year, which is a lot of money for a small news organization. But the changes we made, I think it dropped down to maybe losing 22 million. But yeah,
Yeah.
we got it in the
Yeah.
right trajectory. The trend was going in the right direction, which is always, I think it was a beyond anyone's capability to make it profitable. The type of news journalism it does, it is always going to be investing more than it gets back in return. But it's still there, and that's a positive.
It's still a win.
For companies going through transformation and turnaround, I think it's very tough. So keep your motivation high, keep the team's motivation high, and keep going. It will work. If it's a transformation, you're tending to start a slightly better place, and motivation tends to be a bit higher. But the same persistence is required. But the thing for me to focus on is you can change your systems, you can change your processes, you can change your location, you go to different offices, you can go to different geographies. And the one thing that is going to make it successful is your culture. If you focus on your culture, people will do the right thing because you've hired good people to do a good job, and they're in the right environment, and they've got the right culture to support them. That beats everything. Culture beats strategy for breakfast. And it is very true. I can give you a wonderful strategy, but if you don't have the right culture to execute on it, you'll be okay. I can give you a mediocre strategy with a great culture, and you'll just fly. Culture every time. Strategy, absolutely. You need a good strategy. You need to know where you're going. You need your OKRs to align all the teams. You need a process and systems underneath it so that you can constantly be evolving and improving yourself. But the one overriding thing is culture. Okay.
What do you think that high performance companies do differently from average performers?
I think that goes back to culture again, to be honest. But I think it's a culture of probably very specifically that, and there's probably a few things in there. I remember, and I'm going to forget the words of it. It was Tanya Cordray at The Guardian that taught me. It was healthy tension. And it's the fact that actually it's healthy for an organization to disagree. As long as it's healthy, it's good. As long as when it gets into toxicity, it's bad. But everything in life, everything in a business is a compromise. And you need that healthy tension so that you're fighting your corner because this is what's right for you and your focus and your team. It's only that healthiness where we actually get to a compromise that your team's winning, my team's winning, and the organization is winning. So that healthy tension is always really important in there. But it's the culture of not failing, learning. So when you get into an organization and if you fail, it's seen as a loss, you've done something bad, it's wrong. That is just never good. What you want is the organization to learn and to grow. There's a really good story, and I don't know that this is true. I hope it's true, but I'll tell you anyway because it's a good story. A guy, I'm going to say IBM because that was the story I heard. An employee of IBM goes into the CEO of IBM and just says, "I'm really sorry, I've made a mistake. It's just cost us $600,000. Obviously, I'm going to resign. I made the mistake. I'm really sorry. I just wanted to tell you face to face that I made the mistake and I'm resigning." And the CEO said to him, "Why would you resign?" He said, "I made a mistake. I've cost the company $600,000. He said, "I've just invested $600,000 in teaching you how not to make that same mistake again. Why would I want you to go to one of my competitors and take your learning to them?" And it's that kind of culture. And it's only really a mistake if you don't learn from it. And that for me is a very core part of a high performance team. It's not the fact that you're going to not make a mistake. It's not the fact that you're going to avoid them. It's the fact that you learn from them and you learn quickly. The shorter you get that learning cycle, the better you get.
That's such a great takeaway. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. We really enjoyed having you.
No, thanks, Neeta. It was lovely.
Thanks so much for listening to Good Revenue. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the show, give us a rating, or leave us a review. You can also catch full videos and highlights on our YouTube channel.